Great. I think Floris really set me up quite nicely. He has a lot of experience working with many, many different teams. I have 2.5 years of experience failing miserably consulting for Real Madrid while I was at Microsoft. 5 years, I think I did a good job in Benfica. And then I'm finishing the whole Southern European cycle by moving to Italy as well. The quality of life is nice. What I'd like to talk about is determining what's interesting versus what's important when it comes to actually making the final decision within a football club, whether that's in the transfer market, whether that's in the week-to-week sort of match planning, team planning. So football is quite similar to a continuous delivery cycle, to a product, a service, a platform that's continuously evolving, continuously updating. And as you can see, Atalanta, we have a game. We had a game yesterday. We play again on Thursday, and then we play 4 days from now, and then we play 3 days. So every 3 days, we need to be releasing a prototype, a version of our team out in the wild, and hopefully the version that we give out will be the one that wins. And so there's some certain sets of decisions that we can make to be able to make sure that we are doing everything that we can to optimize for the next game. These things can be selecting who are going to be the people who start the game. These things could be how should we train tactically? How should we train tactically? What sort of things should we do? As Floris was saying, focusing on those sort of like subgroup interactions. How does the striker interact with the wing back, with the goalkeeper? You could do human performance interactions, things like, okay, how do we make sure that the person is well recovered? When you're playing a game once every 3 days, you accumulate a lot of fatigue, you accumulate a lot of lactic acid in your muscles, and so what are we doing for recovery? And then you kind of have your summer and winter windows where you have the time to actually buy and sell players to be able to make bigger updates or more major updates to your squad. So basically, we need to now understand what projects from a data perspective, from an algorithm development point of view, are actually interesting, but maybe they don't move the needle, they don't help us actually improve, versus figuring out which ones actually help us improve. So it's a dangerous relationship, this. You have many senior executives at football clubs. Most of them are ex-players. They come from varying different educational backgrounds, and they just read somewhere, they hear somewhere that every other team has a data scientist, so they hire their own. But they don't really know what that data scientist should be doing. And you either get two types of data scientists. You either get clubs that have small budgets, so they hire a more junior data scientist, and this junior data scientist wants to make a mark, doesn't need some mentorship, doesn't really know what to do, is just kind of like looking at the data set and saying, okay, I'm going to work on expected goals, or I'm going to work on predicting the difficulty of a pass. I just read this, I saw this thing the other day, and this looks really cool. Maybe I want to study about shape disruption and, how does a line-breaking pass affect the center back line or something. So the shiny object syndrome, combining with senior management not really knowing what data scientists should be doing within a football club, creates a really sticky situation. So it brings me to my first conclusion, or my first key takeaway point. Self-regulation is super important. I would like everyone in the room to just breathe 1 or 2 times with this shape. And this right here, I swear, is probably the most important skill that I have as a data scientist within a football club, is learning how to stay calm, learning how to stay intentional, and making sure that none of the frustrations that, okay, senior management doesn't know what I should be working on, I don't really know how my work is influencing the final decision, whether it's making tweaks in the match day or making the purchase or selling of a player. All these frustrations, they go away when you breathe, and breathing is really nice. So where can data fit within football? It can fit within the transfer window. So as Floris was showing, you can have some algorithms that have the expected transfer value of a player, that have what is the expected goal differential added that a player might give to your team if you bring a player. The tricky situation here, the data science here, is trying to understand if you bring a player from Portugal and you bring them to Italy, what does that conversion rate look like? It's kind of like converting US dollars to euros. How do you actually take someone's performance within Portugal and then convert that to the currency of Italian football? So you can obviously use data within the transfer window, and that's the majority of my work in Atalanta. You can use data within match analysis, so trying to understand some trends about your own team, strengths and weaknesses, or opposition analysis, some weaknesses that you can exploit with the opponent. You can do human performance, so you can try to use data to be able to measure sleep. You can do blood lactate testing to be able to understand internal load. So if like miles per gallon was a synonymous thing for efficiency of a human body, you could use blood lactate testing to be able to understand, okay, how efficient can someone run 10 kilometers? What is that load placed on their heart? And then how can we actually improve that relative to sort of some benchmarks that we have? This one's my favorite. Data can fit within football in the hallway in casual conversations. I'm not in every senior meeting with the CEO, with the sporting director, with the owner, but my data is there. So I'm still present in the most important meetings at the club as long as I can pass my information on. And sometimes that's a WhatsApp message. Sometimes that's grabbing beer with my boss and just like hashing out some stuff without filter. Sometimes that's just, watching training with somebody and just passing on something. Oh yeah, I saw this thing about our player. Adamul Lookman, he's very, very good at being able to attack from the left, but also his efficiency is not so bad from the right as well. They're statistically quite similar. So he's interchangeable. We can play him in both sides. And then, okay, the sporting director takes that, the CEO takes that, and then I'm still present in those important meetings, even though I'm physically not there. So this is my favorite one, I guess. Data can fit within football in the boardroom. So this is usually end of season analysis or trying to do a review on your scouting recruitment process, or things like this, like how much money did we potentially make with the sort of transfers that we did, the purchases that we did in the summer, or what are the strengths and weaknesses of the team around squad planning. So every summer you want to be able to refresh your entire team. You want to be able to get 6-7 players, blah blah blah, but it's not possible. It's very hard to make 6-7 transfers work within one summer. So in the boardroom, you have these sort of meetings where you say, okay, how do we actually prioritize? Do we get a center back first? Do we get a striker first? Do we get a wing back first? And so data can fit within the boardroom for these sort of strategic planning meetings. So where should data fit within football? When I was working at Benfica, the CEO, the old CEO, he always said to me, hey, are you doing whatever it takes to win? I was like, man, I don't know. You just need to score more goals than the opponents. Like, I'm not really sure what we need to do to be able to win. And then the other is, what does it take to develop? And so every project that I work on, or that we work on as a data science or a sports analytics industry community, should try to tackle these two problems. Is the problem, or is the project we work on, does it help us learn something about the game so that we can win? Or does it help us learn something about skill development so that we can improve our players and create better players? The second one is super important because as transfers become more and more expensive, now 30 million doesn't really get you too much at the highest level. You need to be able to develop your talent in academies, your younger players, and so investing in understanding how to develop players is massive for even teams like Manchester City. So I'm going to just walk you through some examples that I've used in Atalanta or in Benfica on just like making different decisions. And yeah, take it from there. So this first one, is basically showing you something from last season's Serie A. There's two different KPIs. The one on the right, the one on the x-axis is called expected goal differential added per 90. So how many goals does this person contribute to the team per 90 minutes? This can be anything from a pass, a shot, a ball recovery, a tackle, interception, a header, any sort of action. How does that actually contribute towards the team potentially scoring a goal or not? And then on the y-axis, there's this thing that I like to use called vertical efficiency, and that's just how vertical is the player relative to sort of the vulnerability that he exposes or she exposes us to when they lose the ball. So you might have players who are super, super vertical. They're able to take the ball from the halfway line to the goal, but at the same time, they lose the ball a lot. And if they lose the ball a lot, it puts us in a bad situation. A good example of that was Ruslan Malinovsky. So we had Ruslan Malinovsky in Atalanta for some years. He was phenomenal for 2.5 seasons, but the data started to show that he was just losing the ball too many times in dangerous situations. So this sort of graph can be used to be used in the transfer market. So we know, okay, these different players, they contribute this much per game. And then if you have that conversion, that currency conversion metric, you can then understand how does a player in Croatia or how does a player in Portugal come into Italy and make an impact. What's difficult in answering this is that maybe sometimes you don't have much movement. You don't have many Portuguese players coming into Italy for various reasons, maybe because of size, physicality, cultural differences, whatever. And so then you need to be a bit clever and creative in terms of understanding, okay, if you don't have many movement between or much movement between Portugal and Italy, how can we still infer or create some sort of prediction around the projected contribution of a player coming from Portugal moving to Italy? So this is probably the easiest sort of thing to be able to make a difference, the transfer market, and using data to be able to decide who to buy and who to sell. I think anyone who has made good progress or anyone that's done impactful work in the space within the club, they would tell you that the transfer market is the easiest place to make a big difference and make a measurable difference. One thing that I spoke with Floris before the talk was there's a lot of good work being done in match analysis. Like this example here, a friend of mine developed a deep learning algorithm to be able to understand decision-making of players. And so blue is one type of decision, red is another type of decision, green is another type of decision. And then, okay, it looks like phenomenal analysis. It's great. He's super, super smart. But I always struggle then to understand how do you actually take this analysis and then see the impact of it on match day. And that, for me, I think is really difficult to at least have a measurement of my impact. Whereas in the transfer markets, I feel like, you know, if I say we should buy this player or we should sell this player, I can easily measure, okay, this was the number of goals that he contributed, this is the amount of millions that we made, or whatever. Whereas here, it's harder for me to understand how does this analysis actually change habits or change behaviors. For me, it's not a big deal, but when I'm trying to explain my work to a CEO or an owner, this is harder for me to kind of say, yeah, this work contributed to 20% of Saturday's win. So this is just another example of kind of how data science or AI can be used for the match analysis space on decision making. Here you have another example of the match analysis. This was the space creation. We're looking at this player here. He's making an off-the-ball run, and he's creating a lot of space for himself that no opponent is really kind of grabbing. And so this is another example of this potentially could help us win. Again, it's very hard to understand how do we actually take this analysis and then implement this in the training session, and then also get the ROI on this work, trying to understand, okay, the 60 points that we made at the end of the season, 15 of those points were actually because of this work. It's hard to make that connection. But nonetheless, it's still a good example of showing what's possible in the realm of football analytics. Another example was a paper I did with someone from City Football Group around trying to understand all the different sort of set-piece routines that teams do on the attacking and defending side. So here it's using some sort of non-negative matrix factorization to be able to extract out all the different features that teams in the Premier League use to be able to attack the goal in the corner kick. Again, this could be super helpful in winning a game. But again, how do we actually create that ROI of understanding the actual impact of this work to the amount of points on the table or the amount of like transfer markets squad value increase that you get at the end of the season? Here, it's another example of just human performance of someone doing like a 1-minute sprint and then understanding what the acute fatigue looks like after 5 minutes. So here it's super important because we want to understand how do we actually limit the effects of acute fatigue. A lot of the times we give up goals when some of our key players are experiencing acute fatigue. They're not able to run as much as they normally can. And so this is, again, another example. But is it important? Is it interesting? I don't know. The answer is you just have to talk. You have to talk to the coach. You have to talk to the sporting director. You have to talk to the players. You have to understand what actually do they want to know, what do they need to know, and most importantly, how do they actually want to receive that information? My boss, he likes receiving a lot of insightful things via WhatsApp. Some players, they like receiving the information via video. Our CEO, he likes receiving information via printed, maybe it's not sustainable, but printed PowerPoints of things so that when he's on the go, he can write notes on it and things like this. And so it comes down to what Floris was saying, which is speak the language of the other person. I tend to think of the world as, or I tend to think of coaches, players, experts in football as kind of these super-brained people. Maybe they're not brained in the sense of having a PhD or went to a fancy school or something like this, but they really know football really well. And everyone has their own Rubik's Cube inside of them. And my goal as a data scientist, or my goal as someone who works with data, is to just help them solve their own Rubik's Cube. I'm not the one who's actually going to be developing this end-all, be-all algorithm or insight that's going to make hundreds of millions of dollars. I'm just trying to help improve people who are way better than me at football, people who are way smarter than me in the game. I'm just trying to help them solve their own Rubik's Cube. So any sort of insight that I might be able to give, which is important to them, which is what they need to know, which is what they want to know in the way that they'd like to receive it, that for me is success, or that for me is victory, because I'm helping someone solve their own personal Rubik's Cube, putting the pieces together. So I hope in these 20 minutes you got to see some different examples of spatial creation, of human performance analysis, of set piece analysis and corner kicks. The possibilities are honestly endless. If you research the number of scientific papers out in football analytics, there's a lot. But the most important thing, I think, is trying to understand what projects to kill, what are the long-term projects, what are the quick wins, and what are the spare time projects. So what you see here is you see impact on the x-axis, cost on the y-axis. And for me, this is how I define impact or importance. Does the project help key stakeholders connect the dots internally? Does the project help us translate the game of football into easily understandable things? Will people actually use this? Or is it just going to sit in my machine or sit in my workspace? And also, does this project actually influence a decision, whether to buy a player, sell a player, all these things? So last but not least, the last conclusion, football analytics is like Italian cooking. It's not necessarily the complexity of the recipe that makes a good meal, but it's the quality of the ingredient. And so I spend probably 25 hours a day just making sure that all my features that I develop are very explainable, very understandable, so that I can prepare data algorithms that are like Italian cacio e pepe. Thank you.
The players like to understand the data. For your experience, do you think that the players value the data, or they don't care about this? And they use the data to try to improve themselves, or what do you think?
Football players are just humans, Some football players really want to improve and they really want to use data, especially the younger generations. Some football players, they just want to collect their salary and go home, and they don't care. So for me, I just take the stance of whoever is really interested, who wants to learn, who wants to improve, I will be prepared and ready to support that person in the right way.
Okay, and at least by the end, a lot of curiosity about the use of the data. It is proprietary or it is public in your case in the Atalanta?
So yeah, the two main data sources that we use is the first is the event data. So that's manually captured. It's about 200 people in one company who are watching the game and making around 3,000 events per game. These are things like pass, shots, dribble, cross. But then we have optical tracking. So we have about 16 cameras around the stadium. And that gives us the positional XY of the players at 10 hertz. So 10 frames a second, we know where everyone is, we know where the ball is, and it's very similar to the work that Flores does with Sci Sports.